It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck, Episode 12, How to Market Your Acting When You Have a Disability, with Shannon DeVido.
It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck. Turn your passion into income, Ben will show you how. With all the resources that you need to make it as an actor in an expensive city. To stay balanced and make money, you really can't go wrong with actingincome.com.
Welcome to the Acting Income Podcast. I'm Ben Hauck, and on this podcast, we talk about anything and everything that helps you earn an income as an actor. Thanks so much for listening. This is episode 12, titled How to Market Your Acting When You Have a Disability, with Shannon DeVido. Pull up the show notes right now at actingincome.com/episode 12. And while you're doing that, here's a word from today's sponsor, my book, Long-Form Improv. I suffered in my long-form improv classes. I was trained as an actor, but somehow I just couldn't get the terminology they used. But as I started to teach others long-form improv, I started to figure out shortcuts for teaching improv, so you don't have to take weeks and weeks of classes. My book, Long-Form Improv, provides step-by-step instructions so you can learn improv fast without all of the confusing teaching. You'll learn solo techniques, group techniques, and eventually how to do the ultimate improv form, the Herald. To grab your copy of Long-Form Improv, also available on Kindle and Nook, type in actingincome.com/LFI. That's actingincome.com/LFI. My guest today is like the sun. No doubt she's a star. But she's also unlike the sun because you don't want to stare at the sun. My guest today actually wants you to stare at her. Her name is Shannon DeVido. If you've ever seen her on YouTube or on television, you know she's electric. She's electric in more ways than one. Not only does she get around using a wheelchair, her energy and charisma will charge you. She's an actor, a comedian, a singer, and a writer, and her work is inspired. Despite a disability, Shannon makes most of her income from acting, and she isn't limited in the roles she plays. I asked Shannon if she'd come on the podcast to talk about what it's like earning acting income with a disability. My hope is that if you're an actor with a disability, or if you're an actor who becomes disabled, you have her experience to guide you and enlighten you, just like the sun. Here's a little about Shannon. Shannon DeVido is an accomplished actress, comedian, and singer. She's appeared on The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, Difficult People as Andrea Mumford, Good Beer as Shannon, Law & Order SVU as Beth Myers, and Sesame Street. As a stand-up comedian, she's performed around the country, including opening for Jim Florentine. She can be seen performing around Philadelphia with her improv groups Wussy Riot and Hell on Wheels, and sketch group Adventure Friends, and in her web series, Stare at Shannon. And now, my interview with Shannon DeVido. Shannon DeVido, hi! Welcome to the Acting Income Podcast. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's so awesome to have you on the show. I know you as an actor. I know you as an actor through a couple friends of mine. You popped up in a video that they had done. And so I'd seen some of your stuff on YouTube. That's how I first got to know you. And then I saw you on shows like What Would You Do? And I saw you on SVU. And then I've seen that also you popped up on The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore, which was more recent. And you are on the upcoming Hulu series, Difficult People. So I understand you live somewhere outside of New York City. Tell me where you live.
I live right outside Philadelphia in a town called Holland, PA.
How on earth do you end up working in NYC when you live in Holland?
I live across the sea. No, I work mostly in New York, honestly. My manager is based out of New York, and most of the jobs are in New York. So I really don't think that you have a choice, and it's really not that far. Like, honestly, a lot of towns in New York or areas, I'm not good at New York, are equally as far from where I have to work most of the time as where I live. So it's not a big deal.
On your resume is a section that says PWD, wheelchair user. You're a wheelchair user. What does PWD mean?
It stands for a performer with a disability.
Do you feel obligated to put that on your resume as an actor?
I do, because I feel like whenever you're an actor and you walk into a room, the casting directors need to know what's coming in there. And it's like if you have a headshot that is 20 years old, it's the same kind of concept.
Do you feel obligated to market yourself as a wheelchair actor, or do you just market yourself as an actor? How does that all fit in with your overall marketing of yourself, or how your manager markets you?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I feel like I try to go in just as an actor. There are times when that does happen, and there are times when it doesn't. And I feel like you market yourself for what roles you want. So if there's a role that I want that happens to be a disability, I'll definitely use my wheelchair. I think that actor comes first whenever you talk about it, but it's the same thing for race or gender. I think that you go in for the role that you're fit for. I don't think every role that I'm fit for is just a person in a wheelchair.
Right. Do you have a sense, I know you have a manager probably working with you, you may not know a complete sense of what you're submitted for, but do you have a sense of how many times you're submitted for just roles and how many of those roles that you're submitted for have some kind of wheelchair component to it?
Well, she's really cool about submitting me for stuff that's not just a person in a wheelchair. Like, I need a 30-year-old woman who is funny. Let's submit Shannon. So and most of the roles out there right now are not people with disabilities. So I feel like a majority of the stuff I'm submitted for is not a person with a disability. I mean, if we ever see something that has a wheelchair component to it, obviously, like,
bells go off.
We submit. It's like, duh. But I think that we try to vary it.
That's good. So you're not marginalized in any, at least apparent way, by having a wheelchair. It's just a part of you. It's not like it's limiting you as an actor.
Not by my representation, but by casting directors who don't call me in because they know I'm in a wheelchair. That's a different conversation.
You use a wheelchair in your daily life, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Do you always perform in a wheelchair?
Yes, I have to.
And then with that comes, I imagine, certain accommodations. So let's say you're going to an audition. Are there any special accommodations you have when you're going to an audition? Do you need to make sure it's somehow wheelchair accessible, or do you just take it for granted this can be? Are there any logistics you take into account?
Yeah, I have to make sure that the place I can get into, that's happened many a times when I've shown up and there are a flight of steps. And while I am a daredevil, flights of steps are not really my forte. You feel like you take that aspect of getting into the building for granted. And it's amazing to me how often I come across that. Yeah, and for network shows, too. It's not like it's Joe Schmo's theater in the village. It's like network television casting directors. I can't get into their building.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
So what kind of accommodations do you make then? I mean, do you get there and then you give a call up saying, hey, I need some assistance in getting into this building, or how does that all work?
Well, a lot of times they won't call me in because they know I can't get into the building.
Oh.
Sometimes if it's a role that they really want to see me for, they will allow me to self-tape and then I'll send it in. But yeah, there really isn't anything in place.
Wow, you just shocked me there. I didn't expect you to say anything like that. That I guess it's just your sense. You don't have necessarily explicit information that casting directors won't bring you in because their building's not wheelchair accessible. Is that correct? Or have you had explicit experience with that?
I mean, they can't say it.
I hear you.
It's illegal, pretty positive. But I mean, once you've been in the business long enough, you tend to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When it comes to your headshot, and this conversation I feel like is helpful, especially for not just in learning about you, but also for other actors who are disabled and may be able to take some inspiration from a working actor in New York City who happens to also have a disability, may be able to take that information and apply them themselves, especially if they for some reason feel like they need answers to questions when it comes to their career. In your headshots, your wheelchair, to my eye at least, is slightly visible, but it's not nearly as evident as your face. So I'm wanting to see how important do you feel it is to say, show your wheelchair in your headshot if you work in a wheelchair?
I think it's important. Again, it's that idea of making sure the casting director knows what they're calling in. But you're right. My face is definitely in the forefront because I'm an actor first. I'm a person first. My wheelchair just happens to be there, and it happens to be my mode of transit a lot of the time. But I think that you need to throw it on there. It doesn't need to be like, hey, guess what? Look at my thing that I have attached to my body at all times. But you need to throw it on there. I mean, it's the same thing if you have a mole and then you edit it out in Photoshop and then you walk in, you have this giant mole on your face, casting direction, and be like, what? Where did that come from? Did you just draw that on this morning? I'm not sure what's going on right now.
Well, I hear you. I guess that's why I have the question, because in one respect, you see yourself just primarily as an actor, independent of a wheelchair, and who's pursuing comedy roles and presumably other roles. And you have it listed on the back on your resume that there's a wheelchair user. And then in another sense, yeah, it's a part of you and it comes with the package. So I guess I wondered whether it was really all that relevant. When I've seen you on video, I see you perform, and the wheelchair may or may not be relevant to what's going on. So that's why I was curious about the question. Would you recommend another actor who has a wheelchair and who also sees himself primarily as an actor, independent of any kind of ability they have? Do you think it's necessary to have a wheelchair in the headshot?
I do think so. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that you just saw me as a performer. That means a lot, because I work really hard to make sure that people watching me feel that way. But I do believe it should be on there. I know it's everywhere else, but I always feel like it's like a dating profile picture. Like, you can put it in the dating profile, but no one actually reads that. But they do look at all your pictures, so it's kind of the same thing.
What a fun correlation. So I know you perform, I mean, outside of the television and outside of YouTube, you also perform on stage. What other kinds of performance work do you do? I
do improv and sketch. Mostly, actually. I think that's my primary performance at this point. And I do stand-up, and I do theater. I did an off-Broadway show a couple years ago, and hopefully I'm doing one next summer. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I'll perform anywhere. I'll perform on the street. I don't care.
So you do a lot of performance. Are you able to fund your life with your acting career work, or what other kinds of things do you do in order to earn money?
I wish I did. It is a large chunk of my income. But I edit videos, and I work for bustle.com. I find articles and put them online, which is pretty fun. I'm a writer. Let's see, what else do I do? I work at the Phillies.
Oh, really? You work at the Phillies?
I do. I have 18 million odd jobs.
It's a collection of odd jobs, and that helps fund it. I see.
Yeah.
Much like many actors I know.
Yeah, pretty much.
As I keep mentioning, I've seen you online, and you produce your own work. I'm curious how your producing your own work has helped you as an actor. I presume it's boosted your career.
Oh, definitely. And I think it gives me an outlet to put me in situations that people wouldn't necessarily put me in, and give me opportunities that casting directors wouldn't necessarily give me. And it also helps them, because then I can say, hey, look at my work. I can do this. You may not think so because you've never had any kind of idea about it, or you've never experienced anything like it before. So it helps me give the opportunity to pinpoint my work and say, no, look, this is what I can do.
You've also had a lot of views, I think, from the videos, which I mean, I can only imagine that it boosts your visibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's such an important thing that actors don't realize, that all it takes is a video camera and an idea, and you don't have to wait for someone else to make an opportunity for you. I think it also has given me a following of people who have maybe never seen a performer with a disability, and allow them to laugh and allow them to have an open mind and have a different perspective on a person with a disability that in television and film you normally see as sick or sad or all of those negative connotations. I'm given the opportunity because of YouTube to put it in a better connotation.
Now, if you're offered those kinds of roles that you just kind of listed off, you're open to playing those kinds of roles as well?
Are they paying me money? Then yes.
And if they're not,
I mean, I definitely, I like to say that I want to pick and choose, but I'm struggling to make a career for myself. So you really can't turn down stuff that gives you an opportunity to shine.
That's a nice segue into your Difficult People experience. I haven't seen the Difficult People episode. It's not out yet, as far as I know. But I did read about your experience on that show, and you were cast. You have your wheelchair, but your role had nothing to do with that. You landed that as a character. Had nothing to do with the wheelchair. Yeah. How might you recommend another actor with a disability to break out of being seen as a disabled actor and simply as an actor?
I think that it takes more than yourself. Unfortunately, I think it takes all the pieces falling into the right place and surrounding yourself with people who are open-minded and supportive and kind and looking past your disability and seeing your talent. I think it takes all of those pieces coming together to create the opportunity to have someone see you as just an actor. But again, I feel like doing my work that I do on YouTube has allowed me to also break out of that mold.
Is that important to you to break out of that mold?
I think, yes, it is. I think that it's important that everyone is seen as an actor, regardless of your difference, whether it be ethnicity or sexual preference or disability. It's very important. And disability seems to be kind of the little engine that could behind everybody else. So hopefully we'll catch up.
Now, you see yourself, as far as I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, as an actor, a singer, a comedian, and a writer. This is kind of covering this a little bit. Do you see yourself as an advocate? Do you go so far as to see yourself as an advocate?
I don't. I think by default, yes. I don't go out and say, I'm an advocate for people with disabilities, because there are people who are, and they're very smart and very good at what they do. And I'm a weirdo doing YouTube videos, eating ice cream cones in the middle of grocery stores. So I don't think that I am the greatest advocate for people with disabilities. But I definitely think there is that sort of undertone that the work that I'm doing is put into the limelight, and I'm often seen, and so that it just automatically gives you the voice of people who are not necessarily heard all the time.
It's almost as if you have advocacy powers, but you didn't take them. You kind of ended up with them. I mean, at least I see that with your Stare at Shannon series. Yeah, exactly. And it's not something that I take lightly. I think that it's a very powerful position to be in, and it's scary because I don't want to do something wrong or put the entire disability community in a hole because I said something stupid, which I'm bound to do. But I also am very honored to be that person because it means that I've been given an opportunity to showcase my work and showcase my talent and be an advocate for a whole group of people who are amazing. I just happen to be the face that they see. I can understand that. One of the last questions I have is what kinds of things do you see as changing in the industry or feel that need to change with respect to actors like you?
There definitely is more visibility of people with disabilities on television and in film. That's 100% getting better, but there's a long way to go. There's still a lot of minds that need to be opened, and there's a lot of doors that need to be opened. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and I think that getting casting directors' minds a little bit more open, producers' minds more open, and casting, the big one is casting people in disability roles who actually have disabilities. I think that once you tackle that hurdle and that becomes a norm, then I feel like stuff will start to happen. Is
it wrong to cast, I guess you say, able-bodied actors in disabled roles from your perspective?
I think so, yeah. There's so few roles for us. Please don't take them. But it also gives that level of authenticity that people who don't deal with what we deal with every day can't fake. You know, you can read as much as you want about being deaf or being blind or being in a chair, but you'll never know what that feels like to live like that, because at the end of the day, you can stand up, you can hear, you can see, you don't understand. And so if you want a real performance, then you're going to get someone who's going to be able to give you a real performance. There are times, that's saying that there aren't times that it doesn't work. I mean, I feel like if the person's walking in the beginning of the movie and then they're disabled by the end of it, then there's a struggle there. And then you have to kind of pick and choose your battles. But for the most part, I think it's really important
Thanks for sharing that opinion, Shannon. I really appreciate that. If someone wanted to learn more about you, where could they find you? Where could they reach out to you?
They can go to my website, which is shannondevido.com. It's a D-O, not a T-O like Danny. And they can find me on YouTube, stare at Shannon, on Twitter. It's all my name. I'm really not that creative when it comes to posting my stuff online. It's all just my name.
I beg to differ with that claim. I'll put all those links in the show notes. Shannon DeVido, thanks for talking to me in the Acting Income Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just as I was finishing up this recording, I got an email from SAG-AFTRA's New York local. The first item in the email was regarding performers with disabilities. Here's what the email says. Last December, the joint SAG-AFTRA and Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers Task Force on Disability met to find ways to facilitate increased audition opportunities for performers with disabilities for both disability-specific and non-specific roles. The AIP member companies were extremely receptive and immediately began to call upon available resources, including Inclusion in the Arts, which maintains a nationwide database of performers with disabilities. If you're a performer with a disability, you can add your information to Inclusion's database. They request that you email your current headshot and resume. Please be sure to include complete contact information, including representation if applicable, and direct your information to their disability and programming associate. I've put the submission details and contact information in the show notes. According to their website, Inclusion in the Arts, quote, promotes and advocates for full inclusion of artists of color and performers with disabilities at all levels of production in theater, film, television, and related media, unquote. With respect to performers with disabilities, Inclusion in the Arts says, we work closely and often with producers, directors, and casting directors across the country and regularly refer actors for roles in film, television, and theater. As the industry grows more committed to representing all aspects of diversity, we are also being asked to refer disabled actors for roles which may not be disability specific. Our nationwide database for persons with disabilities is an essential resource for industry professionals, but it can also work for you if we have your information. We are not agents or managers, we charge no fee and take no commission. Our goal is to serve actors and arts and entertainment professionals to increase opportunities for disabled actors on stage and screen. You do not have to be a member of any union to be included in our database. If there's truth to what Shannon has seen in the industry as a disabled actor, then this kind of advocacy and assistance sounds welcome. For more information, the website is inclusioninthearts.org. And that's the show. This episode was sponsored by the book Long-Form Improv by Ben Hauck. Grab your copy today by typing actingincome.com/LFI. The show notes for this episode are available at actingincome.com/episode 12, where you can leave a comment on this episode. You can also find Acting Income on Twitter and Facebook. Rate and review this podcast on iTunes by visiting actingincome.com/iTunes. Pitch an episode idea by visiting actingincome.com/pitch. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode, check out actingincome.com/advertise. I'm Ben Hauck. Auf Wiedersehen. See you on the next episode. And for more information, as always, check out actingincome.com.